I always feel like this makes it look like I have to be so careful, because if I come too close it looks like I don't have a shirt on, especially if my hair starts to cover this. But thank goodness I do have a shirt on, y'all. I genuinely, I do. I have a shirt on. Hey y'all, it's Ashley at the realm of Kid Lit Comics. I'm still getting used to my very own introduction, which is wild on the low, but yeah. So hello, welcome to the very first wrap up on this channel that includes Kid Lit. I feel like I'm gonna have to, once again, this is kind of like a dilemma with my other channel, trying to figure out the best way to do wrap-ups because I inevitably read so much. I'm not gonna do weekly wrap-ups. I feel like that's too much of a time commitment for me, and I'm gonna have my water with me because let me tell you something, my mouth is dry. It is dry and I'm about to do some talking. Hopefully this video won't be excessively long. I'm trying to keep it, you know, close to the heart here. I don't want to pour too much out in this video, but I do want to talk about what I've been reading. I may do a mid-month wrap-up. We'll see how things go. And some of the books I'm not going to really talk about for the simple fact that I am doing a reading vlog that has these books, so I'm not going to do a full in-depth review, and that vlog will be coming at the end of the month, and I'll explain why, but we'll get there. So I'm going to break this up into several different categories. This is the November reading wrap-up. I'm going to talk a little bit about the picture books and leveled readers that I ended up reading. Then I have my list in front of me. If it looks like I'm looking somewhere else, it's because I am looking somewhere else. But I have it by picture book / level reader. Then we have our children's section, we have a middle grade section, and then we have a young adult section, which funny enough, a good, not all of it, but some of the YA stuff I will not be able to talk about, which is fine. And I'll say why. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in. Let's talk a little bit about the picture books. I'm not going to go into specific details with these. I'm thinking that maybe in the next year, I'm going to have to come up with some type of plan of a picture book wrap up because I read so much in a year, in a month. So it's kind of hard for me to sit down and thoroughly review all of them. I may do picture books as their own thing. I haven't really decided yet. As always, if you follow me on Goodreads, you'll find all of this information. But I ended up reading Meatballs for Grandpa, which was a picture book that dealt with a little girl who loved making meatballs with her grandmother and her grandfather, but her grandfather clearly is dealing with either Alzheimer's or dementia. So that was a pretty emotional read. I'm just going to go ahead and let you know, for most of the picture books I read, I didn't write down my star ratings, but just to kind of give you an overall feel, most times I give picture books 3, 4, or 5 stars. 5 stars is something that is exceptional, one that really stands out to me. But average wise, most of them get 3 or 4. The next one I had was Think of Farmer. This is an informational picture book. So informational picture books are non-fiction picture books, but they are technically picture books. They're written in a way that is accessible for a younger audience. And so Think of Farmer is one of those where it just kind of covers the process of how our food goes from crops to the table, and how farmers are an invaluable part of that process. Next we have Baba's Peach Tree. This is one that I had talked about in one of my vlogs about a girl and her father who had a peach tree in China, if I'm not mistaken, and then he ends up getting a different position, and it's kind of like her connection to her child, like a new position in terms of a job, but it's more of her ode and connection to her childhood and the passion that her father had for growing peaches, and how much it kind of changed him when he wasn't able to do so anymore. The next one is It's Time to Hush and Say Goodnight. This one is one that I had really enjoyed. It's great for, I think, like a bedtime story, or if you are a educator or a librarian that likes to do things like Pajamarama, which is like story time in your PJs, I think this is a great one. I'm always on the hunt for picture books that have South Asian representation because that has been an issue in the past. There are more coming out. Publishing is doing a better job of it, but this is a great bedtime / storytime picture book that has South Asian representation. Me and my little one read this one and we really enjoyed it. I believe we actually ended up reading Baba's Peach Tree, It's Time to Hush and Say Goodnight, and then also Mina Can't Wait at the same time. So Mina Can't Wait is one of those intergenerational stories that I love, where we see relationships between children and older people coming from older generations. This one is about a grandmother and a granddaughter who make a specific type of Bengali tea together. I thought just culturally it was really, really interesting. Then we read Amaleta of the Treasures, which once again, relationship dynamic between a young girl and her grandmother and the treasure she brings whenever she comes to visit, and how hard it is for them to kind of be separated and have a relationship that is long distance. The next one I have is another informational picture book, and it's Daughter of the Light-Footed People. This was a picture book biography. I loved it. I did not know anything about her like prior to reading this book, and how she is an amazing long distance runner, and how it's very connected to her indigenous roots. Absolutely adore that one in terms of the artwork and everything. We specifically read that one together. I wanted to make sure that we were reading some books that had Native and Indigenous representation in the month of November, just for her to kind of get that exposure. Then we read All the Rocks We Love, which was another informational picture book, but it specifically talked about different types of rocks. And so she had fun kind of asking questions about, like, in the pictures, well, what type of rock is this? And I like that this one was written in a narrative style. Even though it is a science-based informational picture book, it was a good read aloud, which I look for in a lot of nonfiction. So it's more narrative nonfiction, which is something that for a 5-year-old is great. There are some informational picture books out there that are really, really heavy in content that are perfect for an older audience, but I do like to incorporate nonfiction into our reading at night, and narrative nonfiction usually is the place for me to kind of cling to, especially because she's still at a younger age. The next one I ended up reading was Mooncake's Mean Family. This one was really, really cute. So this is about making mooncakes, the celebration of the Mid-Autumn Festival, which there are not a lot of picture books that have that representation. I think there will be more coming out in the coming years, but there's not a lot to choose from. So it was nice to see that this one had released this year. The next one that we read, I actually read with my kiddo before the ships came. And I think they underline it because I don't have the picture in front of me, but I believe it says to, like, the subheading is The Birth of Black Excellence. And this one I think is good to use with older kids. I would say that this is good for, like, I would say 5, 6, 7, leaning more towards the 6 and the 7, because while my daughter is at the low end of 5, 6, 7, she enjoyed it, but conceptually I think it was a little bit difficult for her to understand it. It was a beautiful picture book. I loved it, but not really understanding the conversation yet about what where Black people, like, have come from, the kingdoms that existed prior to colonization, imperialism. So those are really, really complex and complicated themes for her to kind of get at this point. Not saying that we can't have very basic conversations about it, but I think that this one is intended for an older age group. In terms of actual text, it's not that text heavy. It's not complicated text, not challenging text, but conceptually it is. So I say 5, 6, 7, but I'm leaning more towards the 6 and 7 age groups. Reno Ramos Tour Guide. This was one one of the 2 leveled readers that I read this month. Unfortunately, I didn't get to read as many as I anticipated, but I've read Rita Ramos before. Really enjoy it. If you know anything about leveled readers, those are kind of those, some people call them beginner readers, leveled readers, step into reading books. Those are books that you see that have like the levels on them when kids are like getting adjusted to being independent readers. They are not diverse at all. There has been horrible representation in leveled readers for years, and now some of these companies are doing a better job selecting or kind of bringing to market titles that are more diverse, and Rita Ramos is one of those titles that I've been following now for a while. This one deals with a little bit of conflict with her cousin who's visiting, and the cousin and her abuela keep talking about like the island, and she feels kind of left out because she's never had the opportunity to visit, and it gets a little like it gets a little weird between the two of them. Of course, they reach their resolution at the end where she has to understand that he also is kind of jealous of all the things that she gets to see living where she lives, and he doesn't get to do that living on the island. So typical cousin conflict. I enjoyed it. So the next one that I ended up reading was Libby Loves Science. Unfortunately, yes, this does feature a black, and I'm gonna say unfortunately, but Libby Loves Science does feature a black character. It is not written by a black author, nor is it illustrated by a black illustrator, and so that's just something that I do like to make notations of, just because for my own purposes. I don't use the term own voices, but it is something that is happening more in publishing, and it is something to kind of be aware of. But this series is a lot of it is stemmed base, because of the fact that Libby is into different science based things, although the books kind of have that theme. So it is nice to see girls in STEM. This one specifically is about a newer student that comes to Libby's class, and she wants to have an ice cream party, and when they're in class they're learning about the 3 states of matter. I read this with my kiddo, and it was fun with her, for her to learn, you know, the difference between solid, liquid, and gas, and understanding the difference, just some really basic science concepts that she can understand at 5. And I thought that this was like a really good guide for that. And the ice cream ends up melting, and they use the 3 states of matter to kind of fix the welcome party for the new student. It was really interesting. We enjoyed it. So yeah, so those are the picture books and the level readers that I ended up reading quite a bit, as you can see. And already my mouth is getting like super tight. Okay, so the next section that I have is children's, and this is very interesting because I may do a video on this because I think that it is a conversation worth having, that sometimes I think via social media people don't necessarily understand the age categories and like target audience for specific books, and how there's pros and cons to that, and that every book that you see for children is not in fact a middle grade book. Some of them are chapter books, or I just classify them as children's. Technically, they're all children's books, right? All of this is kid lit, even the teen stuff, all of it is housed under children's literature because they're all considered children. Like, I mean, yes, teenagers, but for the sake of continuity, it's all children's. But I would say this is the children's, like, early chapter book series, right? These books are perfect for ages like 6 to 9. The picture books are going to vary. So a lot of the picture books that I read here, I think would probably be most appropriate for either 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, 7. I didn't really read much of anything that was good for babies or toddlers, but definitely a lot of stuff for 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, 7. And in this category where you're going to see some overlap, right? So picture books have this appeal where they can cater to a wide range of audiences. I mean, in any book can, but when we're talking about ability to comprehend, when we're talking about themes, that's when the age plays a very specific part, right? So I wouldn't give a book that is really a good target mark for 5, 6, 7 to a 3, 4, 5-year-old, because they're on different ends of the spectrum in terms of their ability to read and comprehend what they're reading and to understand those more difficult concepts. So you do have some picture books that would definitely be appropriate for kids that are 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, right? Those more complicated books where they're able to understand those themes, understand those concepts. But here we're talking about chapter books, which are appropriate for 6, 7, 8, 9, and that too has some overlap with middle grade. It's a very interesting thing. And if you would like to see me talk a little bit more about that and how I, as a librarian, kind of learned how to pick up what's appropriate for what age group, I completely can do a video on it. I just don't want to get too in the weeds in this video. But for the sake of y'all understanding how I broke these things up, when I say children's or chapter books, these are typically going to be books that are great for ages 6 to 9. These are kids who are reading independently, who are reading these smaller chapter books, probably less complex sentences, more complicated than a level reader, but not yet in middle grade, which is often targeted at 8 to 12-year-olds, which are a little bit longer. We're talking about more complicated sentence structures, more complicated themes, more older content. And I said more older, and I hate more in ER, more complicated content that would be appropriate for a different level of emotional intelligence, right? So for the sake of this, 6 through 9. I say all of that just to say 6 to 9. These are great for 6 to 9-year-olds. The first one we have is Welcome to Wolfmore. This is a new series that just came out this year. The second book recently came out as well, and I need to read the second book, but it's literally anthropomorphic dogs. I mean, kids love talking animals. I don't know what that is. I mean, I love a good talking animal too. There's a couple series where I like talking animals, but this is about dogs who run a hotel. So Wolfmore kind of is a play, I think, on the Biltmore. They run a hotel, dogs check in. This one specifically focuses on a superstar coming to visit. Unfortunately, something goes wrong where the animals get fleas, and so they have to kind of figure out what happens. It's really, really simple, y'all. I read it in like maybe 30 minutes, but it's good to kind of have some of these things in my arsenal in terms of like recommendations and things that I think that kids would enjoy, especially I have kids who may be wanting to start something like Warriors, but one, they're not on that reading level. Two, theme-wise, I would not necessarily always recommend Warriors to kids in that age group. Warriors is good for 8 to 12, but 6 and 7, I mean, it's a parental choice, but content-wise, it's a little bit darker. So if a parent or a caregiver was to say like, oh, you know, we want something with talking animals, you know, my kiddos in 1st, 2nd grade, what would you recommend? Welcome to Wolfmore would be one that I would kind of gravitate towards. The illustrations are really, really nice. So I did end up giving that one 4 stars. The next one that I ended up reading was Seashell Key. This is another new chapter book series, and I'm gonna look really quick because I think that this had a couple that came out this year already, if I'm not mistaken, or the other ones are going to come out relatively soon. Okay, yeah, so the second one is going to come out January of next year, so very, very soon. Seashell Key is really interesting. It's about these kids who live in Seashell Key, and each chapter is from the perspective of a different kid and things that they like to do, and their stories are all interconnected as like part of a friend group. I think that it is great for kids who like contemporary Mercy Watson, Princess in Black. It's been those are the titles it was comped for, and I do agree. I just wasn't a huge fan of the writing. I felt like it wasn't really engaging, and Mercy Watson and A Princess in Black have a kind of pizzazz to them that I didn't necessarily find in this. I do like that we are getting diversity in this though, because you're not going to find that in Mercy Watson, you're not going to find that in Princess in Black. So it's nice to kind of get that with this, especially with the author and the illustrator. So I appreciated that. I probably will read the second one. One of the issues that I think too is I read this on my Kindle and I think there was a slight formatting issue with it. It didn't read very well. And so I think that maybe it's probably best for me to read this physically. So I probably will pick up the second one in January, but I only ended up giving this one 3 out of 5 stars. Okay friends, let's talk about the middle grade books that I read. Now these are the books that I think are great for ages 8 to 12, and your mileage is going to vary on every single title. Some of these can be a little too much for the younger end of middle grade. Middle grade is a very, very broad range, y'all. I don't think people understand. When people hear middle grade, they think 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and that's not true, because young adult technically covers middle school, because young adult usually starts at 12. There are some young adult books where they're appropriate for 12 and up, which is why I always say that 12 to 14 age is that tween age, they're very difficult to rec for. Even I would say even 10 to 14 can be kind of a dicey situation, because they're still in middle grade, but then at the same time they're not. And so eventually I will do a recommendation video where I will give some recs for 10 to 14. But middle grade is often categorized as 8 through 12. That's typically what we do with middle grade. Some of this stuff is going to be great for the lower end, some of it not so much. So the first one that I have on this list is Crushing It. This was so cute. This is a sports contemporary middle grade book that focuses on 2 girls who used to be friends. They were close. They played soccer together, but then things go wrong. What's interesting about this is that the 2 of them end up connecting via a chat, like an online chat, but they don't know that it's the other person, right? So they have this beef in person, but they're talking online. And they used to be friends, but then they are kind of developing a little something else with each other. So this has LGBT representation. I think it's really interesting because it does have that sports element to it. This definitely is heavy on the soccer terminology, which I appreciated and loved. And it's nice to see some sports books with young girls as lead. The fact that this had a cute tween sapphic romance in it, like just cherry on top of it. But the 2 of them are also working through some familial issues, and so it's the 2 of them kind of going to each other for advice via the chat, but then not really getting along in person. That added kind of this level of tension to it that I really, really appreciated. I actually was, and my copy's upstairs. I'm pretty sure my copy's upstairs. Aaron Becker, who's the author, actually sent me a copy of this and asked me to read it, and I was more than happy to do it. And I loved it, y'all. It was really good. I actually ended up sending Aaron an email back and was like, and I typically don't do this, but I was like, I really, really enjoyed this book. Like, it was great. I know a tween that I think would really, really enjoy this. Like the soccer element, the fact that it is a sapphic, tween kind of romance, first crush, kind of an friends to enemies to crush type of situation going on. I think that was really cute. It was very, very well done in my opinion. It was raw, y'all. It was realistic, and it really captures what it's like to be in that age. And that's what I typically look for in any middle grade book that I'm reading. Like, how well does it capture the experience of this age group? And that's hard to do considering that you're an adult writing for this age group. You really, really have to know your audience. I think Aaron did a banging job of it. And I'm going to give that one a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I haven't written my review yet, but I need to write it, but I haven't done it yet. The next one, or the next 3, No, 4. No, 5. The next 5 I'm not going to go into detail about because I did talk about these in very specific detail in a vlog, so I will link that vlog in the card symbol above. That way y'all can check out what I read and my thoughts on these. But I did end up reading every story ever told. This one was it was low-key a disappointment for me, y'all, because it was a sequel to A World Made of Glass by Amy Polanski. I loved A World Made of Glass. It was historical fiction, 1980s, AIDS epidemic. Loved that book so much. And this is a follow-up to that book where the main character, Iris, in that book, it's her daughter. And I like that it was like the interconnectedness of like how we impact each other and how advocacy can be passed down generation to generation. But it didn't hit the same way that World Made of Glass did. So I think in my vlog I said I gave that one like 3 or 3.5 stars. I also ended up finishing The Crossbow of Destiny. This one was really, really great. It was based off of Vietnamese folklore mythology. I thought it was so unique. And I look for that in middle grade fantasy because that market at one point became so oversaturated. And it still is, and I wish that we would get some more middle grade science fiction. But I like when I get a unique story, and this one I had to pay not that I don't pay close attention, but this one in particular, I was very, very, very kind of like very, very drawn into the story because it was not a folklore that I was familiar with, and I appreciate it because I took so much away from it. This is a standalone. I do think that it had a little bit more space for some detail, but this is one of those fantasy books that would be good for a kiddo that is just getting into fantasy because it's not long, right? This is not one of those fantasy books that's like 400, 500 pages and it's a middle grade book, which we can also have a whole dialogue about why middle grade books do not need to be that long, especially post-pandemic. That's ridiculous. But yeah, it's one of those introduction type of fantasy series that I would recommend for like 7, 8, 9. I listened to this one on audio and really appreciated hearing I think Vietnamese is such a freaking pretty language. It's so poetic, and I always say that, and anytime I listen to a book that has Vietnamese characters written by a Vietnamese author and I can get the audiobook, I do, especially if I know that there's going to be Vietnamese in it, because I love hearing Vietnamese. That is you cannot tell me any differently. Vietnamese is such a beautiful language. So I highly do recommend listening to that one on audio, but I do talk about that in the vlog. I also talk about Accidental Demons. Claire Edge, if you ever see this video, you killed it. You killed it, you killed it, you killed it. And I've been wrecking your book to every human possible. Every human possible. Absolutely loved your book. Accidental Demons is one of the top books that I have read all year, y'all. If I could give this book 1,000,000 stars, I would. I fangirl about it. I talk about it. I've been wrecking it to every single human. Everybody. Because Claire Edge did something that no one else has done yet, in my opinion, as well as they have done it. And it's the fact that we're getting a main character who's a blood witch that has type 1 diabetes and encounter demons every time she goes to take her blood sugar. Great disability representation, great conversations about magic and discrimination that can exist in situations like that. Ooh, Claire, you don't know. You don't know what you did for me with that book, but I fangirl about that book in that vlog too. I also talk about Impossible Creatures in that vlog, and this was a tough one. I gave it 4 stars, but I'm also an adult reading it, and the reason why I would want you to check out that video, y'all, because it seriously explains so much about this book. This has been like everyone's best children's book of the year, like Barnes and Noble, like all these bookstores have kind of like elevated its status here, right? However, hear me out. This is a very specific fantasy for a very specific group of people. It is definitely written like old school fantasy, Tolkien-esque. I think that Catherine Rundell has been compared to George R. R. Martin, Tolkien, and a couple of other people. I would not broadly recommend this book. I enjoyed it. Like I said, I gave it 4 stars. I think the illustrations were gorgeous. And it was jaw-dropping at the end. It was the ending completely unexpected, right? I would be mindful giving this to sensitive readers. I would be mindful of giving this to any reluctant reader. It's not for them. These are your voracious, reading at or above grade level, super huge fantasy fans. That's who that book is for. And even as an adult, it took me a while to get into the groove of reading it. But I talk about it more in that vlog. It's very interesting because it's 2 kids who are from different worlds. One is from our world, another is from this archipelago that has all these magical beings, and the magical beings start dying. And so she enlists his help to save the day. There's some issues with it that I talk about. There's a linear aspect of it that I wasn't a fan of. The writing, immaculate. Too immaculate for middle grade. Almost a little too poetic. Very purple prosy. Just go watch a video, and I mean, it's timestamped. If you don't even want to watch the whole thing, it's timestamped on there for you to check it out. And the last one that I think I talked about in that video was Louder Than Hunger. This one is one where I definitely recommend checking out the content warnings for it, because my goodness gracious, she did a massively great job writing this book, but it was tough. And it is centering a main character who struggles with disordered eating. So if that is something that you are not comfortable with, or your middle grade reader is not comfortable with that, I would be very mindful of that. This is one of those books that I think would be best for 10 to 14. And it kind of crosses that line, it blurs that line of middle grade and young adult. This is a tween. Like, this is heavy-handedly, for me, very much so a tween book. And one that I would recommend for tweens for the subject matter alone. So I put it in the middle grade category because it is still in that range. It's got 1 foot in that range, but it also has 1 foot in young adult. But it's that 10 to 14 group that I think would resonate with them the most, to be quite fair. That's just my personal opinion on that one, but I do think it was very well done. But check the content warnings for that, because it is about his struggle with disordered eating and his recovery process, which is not always successful. It's very raw, it's very real, and it is based off of Shu's own experience with disordered eating. I don't know if I mentioned these 2 in that blog, so I'm gonna I did mention one, but I'm gonna explicitly talk about these. I did end up reading a few graphic novels, one of them being The Ribbon Skirt by Cameron Mukwa. This is about a 10-year-old that is non-binary, two-spirit, and wants to make a ribbon skirt for powwow, and they really struggle with what people's perceptions of them will be at the powwow. This was great. The artwork was really great in this. I think that the simplicity of the text makes it really engaging for a younger audience. I think the content is really great because we don't have many books written by two-spirit authors about two-spirit characters for kids. And so when I saw that this was coming out, I was super excited and happy that I was able to get this from Scholastic for review and shared it on my Instagram. But I really, really enjoyed it. It's, you know, about family, it's about community, it's about connection with spirits, connection with oneself, and really understanding what it means to be two-spirit and how that is for indigenous communities, right? That's not something that we just broadly bring into any other culture. And so I highly have been recommending this one as well. And I like that the back of this did it did contain some like definitions and some history, like the history of the ribbon skirt, history of powwows, what to do when you go to your first powwow, what does it mean to be two-spirit, and specifically at the end, I love this because it says, not all indigenous LGBTQIA plus people identify as two-spirit, but all two-spirit people are indigenous. I just want to make that very clear, because we have people out here claiming to be two-spirit and they're not indigenous, and it's, yeah. There is a wild rice berry salad recipe, and then also a bibliography if people want to learn more information. So I ended up giving this one 4 stars. And then I finally finished The Blood of Olympus by Rick Riordan. This is the 5th and final book in the Percy Jackson and the Heroes of Olympus series. I can't say anything about it. Literally can't say anything about it. But I finally reread this series. It's taken me forever to read it. I think I've read the entire thing this year. I need new copies. This copy's looking kind of yucky. But I mean, this was a 500-page book. I think I talked about this a little in the vlog where I said that it made sense. I did end up giving this 5 stars, but it made sense how Rick Riordan was able to take this series and the way that he ended it, opened the doors for the Trials of Apollo. How he wrote this definitely was an easy way for him to kind of continue that process. I am going to be reading more of the series. My goal for next year is to make it through as much of the Rick Riordan Presents line as possible. I don't know how much I'm going to get done because I have a lot of things that I'm trying to read next year, but I am hoping to get to the Rick Riordan Presents and the Trials of Apollo, as well as the Kane Chronicles. I need to get to what's Annabeth's cousin's name? Magnus Chase. I need to get to that too. But 5 stars, really enjoyed it. I ended up reading some other graphic novels that were very interesting. I did not have a great run with middle grade graphic novels after reading The Ribbon Skirt. My kind of 4-star, 5-star feelings did not last after that. I ended up reading 2 more. One was Dear Dad, which I was so conflicted when I read this. It is about a young girl, the author, J.J. Patton, her experience with her father being incarcerated. There has been chronically like a shortage of books in kid lit that detail the experience of children who have incarcerated parents. So there are a couple of picture books that do exist that I like, but then we get this graphic novel, right? And I'm like, yes, graphic novel. And it wasn't that the graphic novel was bad. I think that this graphic novel, unfortunately, suffers from some marketing issues. So I thought that it was going to be about the experiences that she goes through with her dad being incarcerated. And it does talk about it a little bit, but most of it feels as though it's about the app that her and her dad created because they were both interested in coding that connected incarcerated parents to their children and children to their incarcerated parents, which is great. It's definitely changed a lot of lives. It's made a heck of an impact. People absolutely love it, right? And I think it is amazing that they did that. But what I was going into this hoping for, I did not get. And so there's this aspect of it that's a little bit disappointing. The artwork was good. I think that what came from their relationship and her experience with him being incarcerated is great, but I don't know how much I would expect people to go into this thinking like, okay, this is going to be a great resource for kids to understand, you know, kids who have incarcerated parents to kind of connect with it. There's a little bit of that, but I wanted more. And it was really short too. It was like 128 pages. I don't know. Like I said, I have really conflicting feelings about that one. I did end up giving it 3 stars. I also read Knots. Another one. Look at the cover, y'all, right? I thought Knots was literally going to be about a main character who experimented with her hair. Because I had just read a graphic novel, was it this year? I think I read it this year in June. I had read a graphic novel about a girl who really liked doing hair. Her dad was a hairstylist and she wanted to do the same thing, and they ended up like competing. It was fine. It wasn't the best, but I thought Knots was going to be in the similar vein, right? No. 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 This cover will fool you because Knots, it's not a bad graphic novel. It's a solid graphic novel. I gave it 3 stars, right? I was not expecting it to really heavily detail the parental neglect that our main character experiences, as well as the side character. And I'm sure I would have known that more had I read the synopsis. And I think maybe it's time for me. I often don't read synopsis of a book, right? I just don't. But I think it's high time that maybe I start, because I go in with certain expectations and it's not what I think it is. Not saying that the storytelling wasn't good. I thought it was solid storytelling. I love the artwork. The artwork is the type of artwork that I love to see in a middle grade graphic novel. But we're following this main character whose parents both work in the prison system, and they move a lot as a result. And so she ask her mom, you know, her and her mom have a very contentious relationship. Her mom is always yelling. She's always afraid to ask her mom for stuff or to do certain things because she thinks she's going to get in trouble. So she asks her mom basically like, okay, you're busy with my sister. This family's always just got a lot going on. Can I get my hair done? And her mom would typically just save the money because they didn't have a lot of money coming into the house, would just cut their hair in the bathroom. And she's like, yeah, no, I just don't want you cutting my hair in the bathroom anymore. Like, no. Like, no, we're not doing this. And she's like, well, can I like bleach my hair? And her mom's like, I don't have money to send you to a hairstylist. She don't have to go to the store. So she talks to a lady about bleaching her hair, but when she bleaches it, she does it wrong. And then she puts dye on top of it. And I think what was interesting about kind of like the paralleling between the hair and the writing, I may bump this up to 3.5 because I'm liking the paralleling here. And I didn't note it in my review, which is wild of me. But I like the paralleling of the family dynamics get worse as her hair gets worse. So her parents are so hyper fixated on working, and when her dad gets a promotion, they have to separate because her dad, because he gets a promotion, they don't want it to look like nepotism, and so her mom has to go work for a different, and so they split the different person. They split the family. So the younger sister goes with the mom, older sister stays with the dad. And he's so neglectful because he's working so much, and her mother is so, she's not checked out, but she's so focused on taking care of the youngest and working this new job that nobody tells her like, you need to condition your hair, you need to stop dyeing it, like bleaching it and dyeing it because you're stripping your hair. No one tells her that. And granted, everything does come full circle, where the parents become that support system, and there's a teacher that is super great, absolutely adored. Very important that this teacher was a part of the narrative. But yeah, I was like, wow, this was heavy. I was not expecting this to be a heavy book. It was kind of low-key heavy. Very realistic to the author's own experiences. So I think I gave it a 3, but I think I'm going to go back and bump it up to a 3.5. I'm trying to figure out who I would recommend this book to. Like, you know, it's like for fans of, like, I don't know. Because I would not recommend this to fans of Babysitter's Club. Like, they're on completely different spectrums. I'm going to have to think on that one a little bit and think about who I would rec this to. The last thing that I ended up reading was The Misfits, the Royal Compendium. Y'all, when I tell you, I told somebody today, I was like, yo, Lisa Yee did her big one with Maisie Chen's Last Chance, right? That was a Newbery Honor winning book. I loved it when I read it. I think it came out in 22. It was either 21 or 22 that that book came out, right? Loved it. This one, I was disappointed. I was very disappointed in this. This is, and it's not a compendium, it's a royal conundrum. It's Misfits, a royal conundrum. It's the first book in the Misfit series. It took me forever to read this book one. I was really excited because it was Lisa Yee and Dan Santat, right? Love them both. This felt really, really dry. Really, really contrived. I was not engaged with it at all in some ways. It follows a main character by the name of Olive, whose parents seemingly do not pay her any attention. She gets sent to this new school. She doesn't know what it is. It's a boarding school. Come to find out, it's kind of like a, we're training you to be like spies. So it's already not realistic, but it felt so comical to the point that it really truly felt unrealistic. It didn't feel authentic. I do like that Olive had to experience working with kids who were from very different backgrounds. The cast is very diverse, but I was not invested in the story at all. It fell super flat for me as a reader, and I was shocked about how flat it fell for me. Like I said, I gave it 3 stars. Dan's illustrations were amazing. I liked Olive as a character. I liked the characters. To be quite frank with you, it was the plot where I was like, it just felt Looney Tune-ish. It didn't, and I'm not saying that kids wouldn't enjoy that, but like when you've read mystery and espionage books, you know what to expect in middle grade, and this, my friends, this was not it. So I gave it 3 stars. The next book in the series comes out literally at the top of next year, because this one came out in January. I just happened to get to it in November. I'm gonna read it, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm gonna be pressured or pressed to read it, but I probably will read it just to keep up with the series. We'll see what ends up happening. Maybe the second one might be a little better. Let's switch. I think we covered everything in middle grade. We're gonna switch to YA. YA for me is 12 and up, right? Most teen areas and libraries start for ages 12. A lot of young adult books in the past have been reviewed for 12 and up. I'm finding now that a lot of young adult is reviewed for ages 14 and up because of content, and so that's it's a little bit of a mess. So I'm going to tell you about the 5 books that I'm not going to talk about that I read in the month of November. So I ended up reading Dungeons and Drama. I read Death at Morning House. I read The Shadows Between Us. I read The Wicked King. And I read The Queen of Nothing. I'm not talking about any of those because I'm reading those for the Goodreads Choice Awards. And I have been vlogging my thoughts about all of these things. I'm hoping to finish this up and get the vlog out by the end of the month. So hopefully you will see the thoughts on these books by December 31st. Fingers crossed, because it's a lot of content that I've had to read. I also ended up talking about one of these books in a vlog, and that was Riot Act. This is a alt history dystopian young adult book that came out this year that takes place in the 90s, where the government now censors everything, watches everyone, and it's a lot. It felt very real reading it. It felt very, very real reading that book. And I read that book the week of the election. I shouldn't have done it, but I did it. And I ended up giving it, I think, 3 or 3.5 stars. It was interesting, but there wasn't enough world development, right? So we're in this alternate universe where the government has gone, it's the most extreme that I can get, where we're seeing full-blown censorship, where the arts are being censored. But I don't think it was enough development on the back end of that, to be honest with you. I think we could have used a little bit more. I wasn't super invested in the characters because there was a huge reveal at the end, and it felt not as impactful as it should have felt. But I do think that the author did a very great job kind of detailing some aspects of what it would be like to come of age in a society like that. And I love that she used Shakespeare's Henry VI as a guiding theme for the entire book, because the kids want to put on this play, and if you know Henry VI, you would understand the significance. And even though I'm not well versed, they talk about it enough that you understand why this play is so significant as kind of a means of revolting and pushing back against the system. So it was fine, not the best thing that I read. It's not one that I necessarily would go back and necessarily like reread. I think that's it for the books. I read a series of graphic novels. I ended up reading Ready or Not. This is a young adult graphic novel. A lot of publishers now are having like young adult or just graphic novel imprints. I mean, there's been an emphasis on young adult graphic novels. It hasn't really been that way in the past. You read adult graphic novels and you try to figure out whether they were great for a teen audience, but now they're writing graphic novels that are specific for a teen audience, and not all of them are good. It is making me upset because I read 3 and I gave all 3 of these 3 stars. No, I read 4 and I gave all 4 of them 3 stars. Not one really stood out to me. So we have Ready or Not, and I read 5 and they're all 3-star reads. Goodness gracious. So I read Ready or Not, which is a coming of age story about a group of friends where 3 of the friends have their plans set forth for post K-12, right? And then our main character does not really have anything in place. She's the one person that's kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life, and everybody else does. And so she wants to kind of relive the glory years of their friendship throughout the course of this summer, and it's not what she anticipates it being. I do like that it detailed the complexities of their friendship, but to be quite honest with you, it just didn't do enough for me. The artwork was beautiful, but I wasn't as engaged as I wanted to be in that one. I also read True Beauty Volume 1. This one was weird. I don't really know what to make of True Beauty. It's one that I had considered like buying at one point, and then I'm like, yeah, I'm glad I didn't, because I'm in no rush to finish, and I was kind of like mid on reading this first one. It's about a girl who is obsessed. She becomes obsessed with beauty standards, and she looks like 2 different humans. At home, she looks completely different than when she is at school or when she goes out. And she does that intentionally so that she fits in and she has friends, and so she's really into makeup, beauty tutorials, like the extremes that you sometimes see online, like you see in this book. And she ends up meeting a guy who actually I think is more receptive of her as herself, as opposed to all of the makeup stuff that she does. And so I think it's going to kind of deal with their relationship, but he has an ex that seems a little obsessive, and so I think she's coming in as our point of conflict. It was okay. Like, I mean, it was interesting enough, but not enough for me to want to own, so let's put it that way. I also ended up reading Mismatch, which is a Emma retelling. Once again, not bad, solid, but no oomph to it. So we have a main character in the same vein of Emma. He leads his he leads his GSA at school. I couldn't remember what it was called. He leaves his GSA at school and he tries matchmaking people and is horrible at it. I saw his love interest from a mile away, okay? It was no surprise. It was very obvious very early on who he was going to end up with. And so it took kind of that element of surprise or that element of engagement that I could have had with this. It took it away because I was like, I mean, I know who you're going to end up with. And so it's like knowing the ending and getting to that point, but I just wasn't super invested. The art was great. I love the art in this. I love the vibrant colors. I do like the dynamics between the characters, but I think because it was so obvious, I wasn't as invested. I didn't care as much as I should have cared. All right, I also read Sunhead. This is another one, very middle of the road, sapphic, 2 characters, obsessed with a book that's Twilight-esque. The art was beautiful, but it didn't feel like it had any substance. I'm so sorry. Like it wasn't that it wasn't interesting, but it was just like, I don't know, like there wasn't a lot there for me to go off of. So 3 stars. I read Taproot for book club. 3.5 stars again. We talked about this in book club. I'm gonna link it in the card symbol above. Once again, middle of the road. I thought it was cute, but it didn't really do much for me. A lot of the graphic novels I read, y'all, just those 5 young adult graphic novels, and I'm like, what is happening where I feel like nothing is giving me anything at this point. Nobody's giving me anything. Then I read Attack on Titan, volume 1 and 2, and it gave me everything I needed, baby. I gave volume 1 4 stars and volume 5 5 stars. I am determined to really dive into the series and watch the anime because my goodness, I hadn't read Attack on Titan volume 1 in like 8 years. I think the last time I read it was in 2016. It's so good. It is so stinking good. I really, really did enjoy it. That was another one that we discussed in book club, so you can go ahead and check that out. And Bree and I from Lockbooktition, we do talk about that one. So yeah. But out of like all of the graphic related books that I read this month, I am so disappointed because the best was The Ribbon Skirt and Attack on Titan. Everything else was like dud. It was so like blah, and that's not usually what I get from my middle grade reading experiences. So, I mean my graphic novel reading experiences. So it's kind of disappointing. That's not kind of disappointing, that's super disappointing. But all right, y'all, let's talk a little bit about what I'm currently reading, and then I'm gonna wrap this up because I said I didn't want to make this video long, but my god, and my throat is so dry. Everything is just dry, so dry. All right, so I'm in the midst of reading stuff for the Goodreads Choice Awards, so I'm gonna be honest with y'all. It's mainly what my priority is right now. So I am currently listening to Thirsty on audio, and I am currently, let me get the book. I am also currently reading Heartless Hunter. I have the jacket off because I take it off when I'm reading the hardcover, and I'm 62 pages into this one. So we're gonna continue reading the books for the Goodreads Choice Awards. Also, we'll be picking up an Ember in the Ashes fairly soon because, you know, I didn't know that Air takes place in the same world. Love that for me. So those are the 2 books, really, honestly, right now that I'm currently reading. These 2 are the ones that I'm focusing in on. I have some other stuff that I probably will categorically pick up during the month, but this is the month for the Goodreads Choice Awards. I really do want to go back and reread what's the name of the series? The Raybearer duology, because this takes place in the same world as Raybearer. but I don't think I'm gonna have time to do that this month. So I'm just gonna keep it at that. I probably will be picking up my 10, you know, 10 before the end sometime this month. But child, I have ambitious goals and I ain't finna make none of them, because that's just the way I live my life, you know, on the edge. But either way, let me know in the comments down below what you read in the month of November. What was your favorite book? What was your least favorite book? As always, if you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications. If you're looking for ways to follow me on social media or support the channel, all the links will be down in the description box below. And I will be back with another video soon.